Welcome to the Greater Montana Foundation Legacy Project, preserving the history of Montana broadcasting and the pioneers of communication whose vision and foresight brought together the people of Montana.
Hello, I'm Vic Miller, and joining me today is Major Dan Miller, a man who's been a fixture on the Billings radio scene for more than half a century, and a man who's also in the Montana Broadcasting Hall of Fame. Dan, great to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Vic. It's good to be here. I assume we get to reminisce a little bit, do we?
I would certainly hope so. Let's start off by where you were born and raised.
Cincinnati, Ohio. I was a Buckeye. I lived there for 20 years and I went in the Army for a couple of years. And once I got out of the Army, I didn't ever go back. I went back to visit my folks, of course, when they were around, but ended up in Southern California, went to radio school for a few years and left there. Offered a job in Billings, Montana at Cook Radio, and had never been in the state of Montana before. Came to Montana. I thought, well, I'll stick around for a couple of years. The 2 years went by. Our first was born, and we stayed.
What prompted you to decide you wanted to be a broadcaster instead of a sheepherder or some other glamorous profession?
Well, I had a few other options. Believe it or not, I started out in the pharmacy. I went to the Cincinnati College of Pharmacy for a year.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, that's not for me. But when I was about, 15, I guess, I visited WCKY in Cincinnati. They were in the Gibson Hotel, downtown Cincinnati, and I watched this guy on the air, and I was intrigued. That looks like something I might want to do, so I pursued it, yeah.
I came to Billings and went for Cook Radio in 1953.
Yeah.
Had a night shift there for 5 years, which was fine for about the first 3. Then I got married. There was an opening in the daytime. I grabbed it, and there was an opening at night.
Yes.
And I still remember out in the old studio out on South Billings Boulevard.
Right.
Cliff Ewing and I, Cliff was operations director of the station.
Yeah.
We were sitting there listening to audition tapes to find somebody that was going to replace me. And we listened to about 4 of them. Yours came up. Cliff said, what do you think? And I said, I think it'll be okay.
But at that point, Victor, you were desperate. I don't care who this guy is. Get him up here so I can.
It's a warm body.
That's right.
I'm out of here.
Oh.
But a lot of things have happened. One of the things, of course, is when you and I were together way back then, you were Dan Miller, and then all of a sudden you're Major Dan Miller. Tell us a little bit about that.
The country was trying to catch up with Russia. If you remember the Sputniks, they beat us into space.
Right.
And we were desperately trying to catch up with them. And the station decided at that time, the manager thought we were right on top of things. We'll build a rocket and send somebody into space. And of course, we couldn't do that,
right.
But we had a makeshift rocket. And it was out on Main Street in the Heights, and I was selected as the person to go. And you were given the rank of colonel.
Oh, okay.
And when the countdown came, we had the National Guard out and some band was playing, and there were quite a few people out to see this rocket go into space. Well, I entered the spaceship, quote, and they had a countdown, 10, 9, 8, and when it got to 1, I came running out of the spaceship. And I don't want to die, let somebody else go up in this thing. And so I was gone for 3 days, and when they found me again, I was demoted from colonel to major, and the major is sort of stuck because it's Major Miller.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
During your career, you not only appeared on radio station, you also managed a radio station. That's a different ballgame, isn't it?
Yes, it is. You have to, what some people don't understand, I think, when you manage a radio station or any business, you have to assume that's your money. And so when you're spending money, it's money that really belongs to the station, but you're the guardian of. And dealing with people is a challenge. And I took management courses in dealing with difficult people, and it's a help. You learn something from every one of those. But you're right. It's different, and you never ever get to the satisfied point as far as the billing is concerned, because you want the billing always to improve and to get better. And as the market grows, there's more and more competition for the advertising dollar. You look at the ways you can advertise today compared to when I came to Billings 50-some years ago. There's 150 different ways to spend your advertising buck. And so you have that competition. So it's competitive, but I tried to run a pretty straight ship, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Back then, I think there were 4 radio stations in Billings. I was at a broadcasters convention not too many years ago, and this one guy stood up and said, our company owns 100 radio stations. I have no idea where most of them are.
Yeah.
That really speaks well of your commitment to a community.
Oh, yes, yes. And that's what you have today. You don't have that personal touch. You may hear a voice on the air. They've never been to Billings. They've never been in the state of Montana. They do what they call voice track. This was supposed to be the lifesaver of radio, because you could voice track, say you worked the middays 10 to 3, which is how they kind of break it down, 6 to 10, 10 to 3, and 3 to 7. You could voice track that with a computer in about 45 minutes, less than an hour, and then go do something else for the rest of the day. The thing that loses, even when you send information from your city, Billings, to whoever's voice tracking in Denver or the Tri-Cities, they can put things in there, but always will come up a name that you pronounce wrong because you're not familiar with the community. And you lose that local touch that you don't have anymore today. It's corporate America. The place I used to work for, I think they have close to 300 radio stations. But I think, Vic, as soon as the FCC said it's okay for a company to own 4 or 5 signals in one market, you lost the personal touch. No longer do you have the days where we used to walk upstairs and go talk to Joe Sample. Joe, you got a minute? I want to talk to
you.
And come on in and sit down. He owned the radio station, the television station, but I think those days are gone.
Speaking of changes, when you and I started, 78 RPM records, LPs.
Yes.
A great deal of excitement came when you had 45 RPM.
Yes.
A lot of things have happened.
Oh, since then, yes, we've evolved. And somebody told me the other day that vinyl is on the comeback trail, that the sound is cleaner. People that collect vinyl, they want it perfect. They want it without any flaws in it. But Vic, if you'll remember the programs of the Salvation Army, I used to run sometimes on the weekend. It was a huge disc. It filled up the whole turntable, and you'd put it on, it would run 15 minutes. And then it was a strange situation where one of those, you'd put the turntable on the inside, and it tracked out rather than in. Do you remember those, Vic?
Right.
I don't know who they were for, but then the Navy had a show they put on. They'd send it to you on a big disc, and it ran like 15 minutes, something like that. Yeah.
And Savings Bonds had one for a while.
Yes.
I remember that, I believe it was a radio operator in Livingston, played that. Instead of having a savings bond commercial, he put his own commercials in there, and the FCC was not thrilled at all.
I just can't understand that. As you and I know, Vic, the FCC cannot take a joke at all.
We used to, as I mentioned, operate out of the old radio station out of South Billings Boulevard. That's where Cook Radio was. The control room had screens on them, but little green bugs found their way in.
Oh, yes.
Every once in a while, you're playing a record, a little green bug would land on your record, move the needle over about 5 grooves.
Oh, yes. But Vic, at the same time, you didn't want that to happen, but that was part of live radio. Those things happened. Or if you got a 45 that was scratched, it would hit there and keep repeating over and over again until if you went to use the restroom, you put a long enough one on, 3 or 4 minutes, that you could go into the restroom and come back. You hear the monitors in the restroom, and you hear this thing start to click, 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 click. Of course, you charge back in there, but that was part of live radio. That's what made it fun.
And back then, you'd come in maybe half an hour before your shift started and pull your own records.
Oh, yes.
Play anything you wanted to.
You name it, you could play it.
Yeah.
Vic, I've told this story many times. It was my first week out on South Billings Boulevard, and we had a network. We were affiliated with CBS. And at 5 o'clock, I took the board, and I worked, I think, until 11 or 12 that night. At 5 o'clock, we joined CBS, and they gave us a 5 or 6 minute newscast. And one evening, my first shift, I turned up the pot, and the network was gone, as sometimes happened. So you were standing there at the control room, and I said, Vic, what should I do? And I will remember your response for the rest of my life. Turn on the microphone and say something intelligent. Now, you're talking to a guy that's green in radio. We have a good laugh about that. It was fun.
We got in kind of on the tail end of network radio.
Yes.
And they had some amazing people on the air.
Oh.
You know, Lowell Thomas had a late evening newscast. Edward Murrow.
Yes.
Tom Harmon, who's
Sports.
better known as the father of the guy that's on television now. But and then we had just radio shows that Gunsmoke.
Yes.
Remember, Gunsmoke was
You used to have to
wonderful.
record that. Yeah. That was William Conrad.
William Conrad.
Yeah.
And then he had the guy that played Doc ended up as Floyd the Barber on the Andy Griffith Show.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was Floyd the Barber who played Doc.
Yeah.
And of course, William Conrad did not exactly fit the mold.
No.
When they went to television.
Nice voice.
Great voice.
But the physique wasn't there.
No, he and Orson Welles had two of the finest voices I've ever heard.
Vic, we used to carry the opera. I think it was Saturday or Sunday afternoons, and it came from the network, and for some reason, we had to record it. And I don't recall what happened. Remember Bob Lineweber?
Oh, yes.
Well, for some reason, he was on and missed a segment of it in the recording, because you'd record on these 7-inch reels, it would fill up an hour. And so I thought I was being quite wise, and I went from, because he missed this segment, I went from applause to applause. Oh, I thought, man, that's smooth, Miller, really great. The phone rings immediately, and a guy calls who knows this opera, whatever it is, and says, you missed one phase in there, whatever it was. I said, I'm sorry, we didn't get it recorded, but he was right on top of it. Those days are long gone. The old reel-to-reel tape recorder, you don't see anymore.
No, you don't. I came into a television studio at KTVQ not too long ago. Looked at the wall, and I think there were 50 monitors up there. You know, and you worked down here because we had the radio station right next door.
Right.
And the television station over here, and everything was line of sight in television. You have to be able to see out there. Now everybody's back is toward the happening.
It's changed. Well, we always had a lot of monitors up there, Vic. I remember looking at that, and I thought, what good all of those are. But each one covered a certain segment. And now you're telling me they've got 2 or 3 times that many.
I know. Yeah. I don't have the foggiest idea.
We used to stand in the control room. The radio looked down on Billy the Sewer. You were Sincerely Billy, and you could watch the TV show. Or Ava
Johnson.
Johnson, yes.
Yeah.
Did that after Billy left.
Yeah, and then we had Jackie Bennett, and then we finally got out of the Homemaker show.
Yeah. Just think, television used to start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it signed off at midnight. I remember you doing a newscast, and you could flip the camera so it showed you upside down.
Oh, yeah.
And you did a minute or two of the news, and then you flipped the camera. You thought something was wrong with your television.
That was a late night newscast we had, and I got bored.
Yes,
that was the only one here.
I think it was your sign-off newscast.
I think it was.
Oh, yeah, it's so different today, and everything changes. Some of it good, some of it kind of scary. But, yeah, I remember the first color camera, Vic. I don't know what we paid for that. I didn't pay for it, but the company, I think it was $300,000, and that was 40 years ago.
Yeah. Well, we were the first station to go local color.
Oh.
And so when we went on, we all came on with blazers.
Oh, yes.
Bright green, bright red, bright yellow, bright blue.
Why not?
We looked like 4 dropouts from jazz bands, but they wanted color.
Sure.
They got color.
Well, you want to be aware of it.
Yeah.
We've got a color camera, because I assume, Vic, there were lots of receivers in those days that were black and white. You could broadcast in color, but they were receiving it in black and white.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about when television first came on, people would go out and buy a TV set, and those black and white TV sets cost like $300.
Oh, yes.
I was making $330 gross.
Yes.
At the radio station.
I started at Cook, $325 a month, and I remember I worked more than 40 hours. So I remember Harvey.
Oh, yeah.
I turned in my time slip to Harvey, and I put down the 4 hours overtime. He says, you were hired for 48 hours a week. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's the way it was in those days.
Oh, yeah.
It's part of it.
You worked Monday through Saturday or Monday through Sunday. Actually, I worked Tuesday through Sunday and had Mondays off.
Yes.
You know, it was a great day to have off.
Oh, yes.
When you're 22 years old.
I had Mondays off for a while, yes.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, Vic, when they started increasing the hours of broadcast for television, you made the comment, well, they're going to increase it someday, it'll be 24/7. And when you start broadcasting 24/7, there's no way it can all be quality television. And you look at it today, of course, when you program that much, Vic, you're desperate. You're looking for something to build a theme on, an idea, to build a half hour or an hour television show. That's tough to do. They came up with this, what's this series, a survival series? Just looking for something to broadcast.
Oh, yeah.
24/7 is a huge undertaking.
Yeah. I remember at one of the network television programming people was being interviewed once, and they said, why isn't there more quality television? He looked at him and said, quality, hell, there ain't even enough mediocrity to go around.
So true. But that happens.
Yeah.
It's easy to find fault with something until you get into it yourself, and then you realize what you're up against. It's just impossible to do for quality 24/7.
And you can subscribe to like cable television and watch the same movie time after time after time, so you know the dialogue.
Oh, yes. You remember when cable TV first came to Billings, like I want to say 1960, do I remember,
Probably
Vic?
right
Around there. Joe came out with a memo telling us what cable was and how it operated. But at that time, I think you paid maybe $10 a month, and there were probably 10 or 12 channels to choose from and no commercials. Well, you look at cable TV today, it's 24/7, and it's about 24 commercial. There's a load of commercials in there, and you're paying a pretty good sized dollar to get cable TV to your house. But everything changed. That's what I think will happen with Sirius radio, satellite radio. They can't survive without commercials. Somebody has to pay the bill, and that's where the revenue comes from. So when you think you can turn on the radio in your car with satellite service, Sirius service, somebody has to foot the bill someplace. So I would think if it's going to survive somewhere down the road, they will end up with commercials. Otherwise, they've already merged two of the big systems, and they're still struggling.
One of the biggest changes, of course, that you've witnessed is in the area of television, videotape.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
We didn't have videotape.
No. I remember if you cued, the little I did on television, when you cued for a commercial, you had to give them a 5-second roll, because it took that long for those great big wheels to pick up the proper speed in order to get the thing rolling. But yeah, and then of course they wouldn't let you eat or smoke around the video recorders because it would interfere with the quality of the tape. The tape was a couple inches wide, as I remember, wasn't it, Vic?
Yeah, they were.
Do you still have the ability to play those things?
Not the big ones, I don't think. They had some stuff in the basement.
I ask for a reason, because
in the bowels of the building, there might be something.
I have some of those.
Oh.
And I saved them because of the commercials that I used to cut for Gorham Park Drug. And I look at them today, I bet you there's no place to play those. There's nothing to play them on.
It's the same with the 3/4. You know, everybody had a 3/4 machine. And I've got some of those at home. I think I've got one where I interviewed the first President Bush.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Somewhere floating around there, but there's nothing to play it back on.
Right.
I think you can go someplace and commercially they'll do it for
you. Yeah. Years ago when they were building the Wells Fargo building downtown at 2nd Avenue North and 27th, they called and wanted to know if I would record a program, an hour program that they could put in their time capsule. And I did. It was an hour from 7 to 8 in the morning, one morning on Cook Radio. And I gave it to them, and it's in that time capsule. And as the years go by, I think when they finally pull that up, they'll say, what is this? Even if somebody knows what it is, what do we have to play it on?
Right.
So, but I guess time changes that. Maybe somebody will have a piece of equipment, they can see what it sounds like. I don't know.
It's hard to say.
It is.
There was a guy at one time who used to take his camera out and record various and sundry things, including jazz parties.
Oh.
One of them was at the Skyline Club.
Oh, sure.
Up on top of the rims. Remember that?
Yes. We used to get paid $5 to go up and see that show, and we thought we were making big bucks.
The other thing was Ed Pice, who I showed you a picture of. I have an old picture of showing Ed and Cliff Ewing and some of the people who were there when we were here. Ed used to do play-by-play, of course, of the Billings Mustangs, and pickings were pretty slim at Cook Radio at that time, and we'd sold the remote from the Skyline Club.
Yes.
And Ed was doing his baseball game, and it was running long. And you were out in the studio trying to make a decision what we're going to do, and we made one.
We made one where the money comes from.
Right.
Yes. And did he ever know the difference? I don't think so.
So Ed did. We weren't in direct communication with Cobb Field, so Ed did the other 2 innings, and nobody heard him. And I don't think anybody mentioned it to him.
One of his talents, as you mentioned, Ed Pice, one of his talents was to watch the Western Union ticker tape on a baseball game from Seattle or Tacoma someplace and recreate that scene.
Oh, yeah.
When somebody he'd see a guy have a hit ahead of time, and you'd have the crowd noise in the background all of the time, and then he took a
couple of broom handles.
Is that what it was? And he'd hit that thing, and it sounded just like the ball game. And of course, then you cranked up the volume on the crowd because the crowd got excited.
Yeah, he did the Billings Mustangs.
Yes.
That way, and I used to run. He'd have this big disc with crowd noise, and then this other little disc with cheers. And it was pretty cool. The only thing, there'd be periods where they didn't send you an inning, and so he'd have some guy fouling off about 15 foul balls, trying to kill time.
He filled. He always used to close with rounding the third and headed toward home. Yeah, heading for home. Yeah.
There are 2 people I've known in my lifetime that had photographic memories. One
Pice
was Mark Roscoe.
Oh yeah.
And the other was Ed Pice.
Yeah.
And Ed used to be able to, and I was doing some color for him in basketball. A visiting team would come into Billings Central. He'd look at the program, look at the players' numbers, turn the program over, and never use it again.
Oh, that's incredible. That's a talent.
Yeah.
That's a talent, Vic. Yeah.
And when he was doing sports, he'd have like a cue sheet, and he'd have like 10 lines. And that's all it'd be on, and he'd ad-lib the rest of it.
Yes. Yeah. Vic, do you remember in the evening, I think we had a newscast from 6 to 6:15 and a sportscast from 6:15 to 6:30. Well, when somebody went on vacation, you covered the whole half hour. I remember going out there and you'd rip everything off the wire to fill the 15 minutes and you read for a half hour.
Oh, yeah.
And you didn't have a tape machine to run a commercial to give you a break. You took it straight through from 6 to 6:30. That's radio. Good, bad, or otherwise, it was radio.
There've been a lot of changes, we said, in radio. You and I have been in this business for a long time, but essentially, it's a business that could possibly describe as being populated by gypsies.
I guess you could call it that, Vic, because when you and I started to work at Cook Radio, you had to have a first-class license. You had to qualify. The announcing part was one thing, the technical engineering part was another. And I know you had a first-class license, I had one, everybody that worked out there had to have a first-class permit. And I think that's brought about because you no longer have to have a license of any kind. If the company hires you, you take responsibility for the person on the air, and it goes from there. But they dropped it down to a third-class permit, remember, and now they've simply eliminated it altogether.
You've had a few radio stations shot out from underneath you that you've always recovered and ridden off. Right now, when we're taping this this particular program, you're back with a number of your former colleagues.
Yes. I'm with Kurt Anthony, Charlie Fox, Jeff Howe, Tommy B, just
LTF.
Yes. They worked together before I got out there, and it's kind of like down to earth, down home again, because it's people that live in the community, they live in buildings, they know buildings, and they've been here for a while, and it's kind of like home is what it is. Yeah.
You do one program a week for them?
Just one a week, 7 until noon on Saturdays, and they leave that pretty much up to me. I get into music that you don't hear much anymore, 55 through about 65.
Yeah.
And I still play some of the stuff from, I don't touch the Beatles because they came 64 to 74, but I get into stuff, Elvis, the Platters, Connie Francis, Brenda Lee.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the older stuff. Yeah.
And you do the same thing with the program every week on
Yes,
on Channel
yeah.
7.
Basically, it's the same music. I just put it on the television station. People ask me, now that you've changed radio stations, is the television program going to continue? I say, yes, that's entirely separate from what I do.
Yeah. One of the questions I get once in a while, and I'll ask you the same thing. At this stage, would you recommend people getting into this business?
No. No, because it's changed so dramatically. Even 50 years ago, as an announcer, if that's all you did was the announcing part of radio, you had a difficult time making a livable living, if that's what you want to call it. I didn't really begin to make any money, and not that I made $1 million, until I did the announcing radio air part of it along with the sales part of it. But I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. It's too, building the saturation of radio stations is one of the highest in the country. And what happens is you end up cutting rates. Some of the radio stations are selling 30-second commercials for the same thing we sold them for in 1975. So what does that tell you as far as inflation is concerned? They're not even keeping up with it.
At one time, it was looked upon as a profession. Now, to a large degree, it's run by people wearing red dresses and spike heels.
That's unfortunately, Vic, that's true. And if you watch it, that's what it is. And I don't know how you can change that. And part of that is a corporation that's gone public and owns 200 or 300 radio stations. You mentioned Billings to them, and Billings, Montana, they have to go look at the map, and they maybe have visited here once.
As long as it's making money, they don't care.
That's right. That's right. When you get to the point that you sell your station's ID at the top of the hour, you've prostituted about everything you can prostitute, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And maybe radio has always been that way, but I think it's worse today. The competition does that. Yeah.
Okay. Dan, always a pleasure to see you.
Same here, Victor. Appreciate it. Thanks.
You betcha. Been talking with Major Dan Miller, longtime Billings radio personality and a member of the Montana Broadcasting Hall of Fame. I'm Vic Miller. Thanks for watching this program.
This programming series is brought to you by the Greater Montana Foundation, benefiting the people of Montana through communication of issues, trends, and values of importance for present and future generations of Montanans. And by the Montana Historical Society, Big Sky, Big Land, Big History. And with the help of Cordillera Communications, with stations in Billings, Bozeman, Butte, Great Falls, Missoula, Kalispell, and Helena. Cordillera Communications, the Montana Television Network.